Okay, we're going to have a look in this video at how the costs of firms here differ between the short and the long run, and how the long run curve is formed from a series of short run curves. Okay, so if you remember, in the short run you only have one factor of production that can be varied, whereas in the long run all of the factors of production are variable. So the idea is that if a firm is producing, for example, a different quantity and it's increasing its quantity, then the first thing it can do is, in the short run, it can increase the amount of labour, but the amount of capital, that K equals 1, is that there is only one machine in the firm, because that's the short run position. There's a fixed number of capital, okay? And because then of the law of diminishing returns, the short run goes down, the average cost goes down, and then it goes up, okay? There'll be another short run cost curve if you had 2 units of capital. So let's say you didn't have 1, you had 2 units of capital. You'd still have then a short run average cost curve with 2 units of capital, and you'd have 3 units of capital, and you'd have 4 units of capital. So you have a series of short run curves, and they're short run because you have fixed the amount of capital. In this case it's 2 capital, this case it's 3 capital. Okay, so what would happen if a firm was in the short run is that it could move on to one of those curves. But let's say we're on the first one here, and the idea is that in the long run you can move on to any of these curves. You can vary the amount of capital. Okay, so for example, if you started here at that level of output, the firm would use 1 unit of capital and its short run cost curve would go down, and at this point you then have a decision to make as a firm, because in the short run, in other words, if you kept your capital to 1, your average cost would start to rise, but in the long run you could actually move on to another cost curve with 2 units of capital, that red one there. And so at this point here you could employ 2 units of capital in the long run, because you vary all of the factors in the long run. And so if you're a cost minimizing firm, then really at this point here you would decide to employ 2 units of capital. So you'd have more capital and you would increase your output and have an average cost which is on this curve here. At this point you have another decision to make. If you want to increase your output, then obviously you can keep your 2 units of capital, or you could have 3 units of capital in the long run, because all of the factors are variable. And so you go on like so. And so you can see that in the short run, these are the cost curves with different units of capital. But in the long run, if you are minimizing your cost, you could actually move on to this black curve here, which is the long run average cost curve, which I'll show you in this diagram. So let's ignore all those short runs. We're now in the long run. You would basically have a long run cost curve which looks like that. Now, some people argue it joins the lowest point of the short run cost curves. It doesn't. It goes up a little bit, it could go up a little bit, could go up a little bit. It just depends how you draw them. And for simplicity, what we do is we smooth it out to that blue curve, and so that's why we draw the long run cost curve. But as I say, it is not necessarily just joining up the short run, the lowest point of the short run curves. And in addition, this is a useful idea because if you are not adjusting your capital to labour, then the firm is going to be X inefficient. It's going to be producing it with an average cost above what it could if it had adjusted that capital to labour ratio, and that's technically known as technical inefficiency, but we'll come back to that in another video. So hopefully that helps, and it explains how you move from a short run to a long run average cost curve.